Welcome to Cloud Developer channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to use Key Vault with your app configuration service in Azure. So in the last video, I showed you how to create an Azure function and connect it to an app configuration service. But in that video, we didn't talk about how to actually store secrets and where you should store them. Now, one of the nice features of app configuration services, you can actually connect it to Key Vault directly and use the same APIs to the app configuration service to be able to access those secrets or passwords directly through the app configuration API, which makes it very nice and easy for you to build your applications using a common API. So what I have open right here is the documentation to the Key Vault itself, and you can actually go to this website and get a lot more information. So if you click on this documentation link here, it will actually show you and take you through different introduction pages and other interesting piece of information that you can use to start building your application. So in the last video, what we did was we wrote that little Azure function, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that to show you how to extend that piece of code in order to be able to connect to the app configuration and Key Vault and be able to retrieve a secret from that Key Vault. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually go ahead and create a new Key Vault. So let's go ahead and deploy it in our resource group. And I've been doing a little bit of testing, so I already have a Key Vault that was created and deleted, so I'll have to get creative with some names. So I'll call it Cloud Developer Key Vault 2. And the reason why I'm actually having to use a different name is because of this self-delete feature. So what happens is, depending on you having this feature enabled, it will actually not allow you to delete the Key Vault permanently. You will have to wait for the minimum duration of time that you set here, which is 7. So your Key Vault actually won't be deleted until after this period of time expires. If you set it to a longer duration, it will actually exist in your Azure environment for that much longer. And we're going to go ahead and choose next. Under the access policy, we're going to be only storing secrets there. So we're not going to be using it for Azure virtual machine deployments or ARM deployments or Azure disk encryption. So we'll click on next. And on the networking side, we're going to also keep it to public endpoint, and we're not going to be restricting access to it from the outside. And go ahead and click on review and create, and go ahead and trigger the creation process. So as this is actually trying to deploy that Key Vault, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead into our app configuration, and we'll store some kind of a secret value here. So how do we do that? Now, basically what we want to do is we want to go into our configuration explorer, and you want to make sure that by the time you're actually going into the screen, your Key Vault has been actually created. So we'll make sure that happens. And as you can see, actually it's completed. So if I go to that resource, we see it right here. The next step is going to be, let's go ahead and hit create. And instead of choosing the key value option, we're going to choose a Key Vault reference. And this is what's going to allow us to actually reference a particular app setting by its key. But instead of pulling the value from the app configuration, it's going to actually pass it through to Key Vault and give you the value out of Key Vault directly. So you can either use the browse feature, or you can input a particular path to that secret in a particular Key Vault. Now, you can reference it from other places. You don't have to actually reference it from your particular resource group. You can actually point it to other resource groups. So what we're going to do here is we're going to store this as app setting secret, and we're going to give it a label of secret. And in here, it's asking us which subscription the Key Vault exists in and which resource group. So we're going to go ahead and choose the Key Vault we just created, and it's actually trying to locate a secret. Now, a secret doesn't actually exist there yet, so let's go ahead and create one. So before, let's see, so we already have access set up for our account that we're using here, and that's why we're able to actually see secrets. And let's put in a value here It's going to be called app setting secret, or we can give it another name. So let's call it super secret, and we're just going to put in a secret value that you won't know until we actually display it on the screen through the application. So let's go ahead and hit create here, and the secret has been created. So let's go back into our app configuration service, and now let's actually refresh, and then here you can see that it showed up right away. So we'll choose that, and we're gonna actually grab the latest value, or you can specify a particular value that you want to use, which could actually be outdated. So you probably want to always choose the latest version unless you have a specific need for choosing a specific version. So we'll go ahead and hit apply, and as you can see, the Key Vault reference has been added right here. So all we have to do now is just reference this app setting secret in our app configuration code, and everything should be loading. Now let's go ahead and go to our application code now, and in here what we're going to show you real quick is this is actually still a fully functional app function or Azure function. And what we'll do here is we'll just navigate open in the browser. This is on our local machine, and as you can see, we're currently getting the message value out of the app configuration service. So this is working as expected, and the same code is actually deployed in Azure, and it's also returning the same exact value. So now what we want to do is we're going to want to actually grab this app setting secret. Now there's a few things we have to do before. One is we have to actually update our filtering so that app configuration service actually pulls this app setting value. Also remember that we're doing filtering by label, so we want to add the actual label so it includes it in app configuration. Now if we do that right now, what's going to happen is going to fail because it doesn't have access to it. So let me show you that real quick. So we'll go to our app settings file, and in here we're going to add another filter, and we'll just use the wildcard app setting. So give me everything that starts with an app setting and then with a label of secret. So if I go ahead and start it up, we should see an error show up. Let's give it a second. And as you can see, it didn't like it, and it's saying that no Key Vault credential configured and no matching secret could be found. So we know that the secret is actually there, it's just there's no credential that's been attached. So in order to actually configure this to work properly, we have to also tell the configuration service that's starting up on how to actually connect and which credentials to use. And keep in mind, we have this piece of code here that if we're running in a local development environment on our machine, we're using a connection string that has the hard-coded username and password in our local settings file that does not get uploaded into Azure. This is only for our local development. Now if we're running in Azure itself, if you remember, in our app settings file we have just the endpoint, and the way it works is it's using the managed identity of the app configuration itself, so, or the Azure function itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up something very similar, but we're going to have to tell our Azure app configuration to use that credential. However, one thing that we're going to do slightly different here is we're not using a connection string. We're actually going to create what's called an app registration, and that app registration is going to have basically an ID and a secret that we're going to put in also in our local settings JSON file. So the way to do this would be we'll reference OPT and then say configure Key Vault, and here we're gonna tell it to go ahead and connect using credentials. The way to do that would be is to call kv.setCredential, and we're gonna also want to do that depending on if we're running in a development environment or not, just like we did above. So we're gonna say is development environment, and if it is, we're going to say go ahead and set the credential, and the class that we're going to use here is client secret credential. So let's go ahead and create that object, client secret credential, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually grab that app registration that we're going to create in Azure shortly and put it in our local settings file that we'll use only for local development. When it's running in Azure, again, it's going to be using the managed identity. So, and the way we're going to retrieve it, this client ID and secret, is going to be by using our configuration builder, and specifically the iConfiguration root object. So we'll reference it config. And if you remember, we're actually storing things under our appconfig object or node. So we'll do the same thing, and we'll the first item that you're gonna have to pass in here is the tenant ID, which is basically the identifier for your Azure Active Directory. So we'll store that and retrieve that from our configuration, and then we're gonna say config appconfig key vault client ID. And then the last value is going to be our actual secret, or the password for that app registration. So appconfig key vault client secret. So you can't see that, but so it's wrapping right now. And then once we create that object, it's going to be actually used for the local development. Now, when we're doing this in Azure, we're going to say use the new default Azure credential. And here, it should be good enough for it to actually be able to compile. Now, the next step is, again, keep in mind that we have to actually configure the settings now. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put a comma and say tenant ID, see key vault ID, then we're going to do key vault client ID, and client secret. Okay. Now, in order to populate these values, we have to go to our Azure portal, and let's navigate to our Azure Active Directory by going to Azure Active Directory. And under the app registrations, we'll create a new registration. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just call it clouddeveloper SPN. And for the redirect URL, I'll just specify HTTPS localhost. Now, typically what you want to do is you want to actually specify a URL or a URI, and you don't have to do that for this one, but typically you would want to specify your application specific URI. So in here, I'm just going to put localhost, and it's not going to really make a difference for us. I'll go ahead and click register. And it went ahead and created this Cloud Developer SPN, and what you'll see here is this directory tenant ID. So we're going to want to grab this one and actually put it in our app configuration under the tenant ID. Let's go ahead and go to this app registration, or the application client ID. So let's grab that, and it's going to be our client ID. And now what we want to do is we actually want to grab the actual key that we're going to be using. So let's see, where do we do that? So we want to click on this client certificates and secrets, and we're going to create this client secret. So we'll make this expire in a year. I'll just call it default to give it a description, and I'm just going to copy it right here. Now you want to make sure you record this because I believe eventually you're not going to be able to actually see this down the road. So what you're going to want to do is create a new client secret and use that one later on. But we can copy this one and paste it in our app configuration. And that should be enough for us to be able to actually retrieve the secret by using the code. Now, another thing that's important is we need to actually configure that particular SPN to have the ability to access our key vault as well through the access policy. So the way to do that is you go to your key vault, and under the access policies, you want to actually add this particular SPN into this access policy. Otherwise, you won't be able to actually list or get or do anything else with Key Vault. So the way to do that is you click on Add Access Policy, and we want to give it access to be able to retrieve secret permissions or secrets themselves. So to do that, we want to specify get and list. You want to keep it to a minimum unless your SPN needs to have the ability to actually update or change or delete things. In our case, we don't need to do that. And we'll go ahead and select the principal, and we'll call it, we'll actually search for cloud, and you can see it right here. So cloud developer person, cloud developer SPN, and go ahead and hit add, and always make sure to hit save. If you don't save, this is actually not going to persist and you won't have access. Okay, so this is good enough for us to actually run our application now. Let's go ahead and run our function. It should start up, but it won't actually display any information, because remember, we're only retrieving the message object from our app configuration itself. There you go. So our function started up. Last time, if you remember, it actually failed. There was an exception. And in here, now you can see that our function is starting up without any issues. So how do we actually know that it's working properly? So let's actually update this method real quick. And what we're going to do is let's actually output everything that the app configuration has access to. So, and the way to do that would be is, let's see, var response message. We'll change this to actually retrieve every single app configuration. We're going to create a string builder, and what we're going to do is we're going to iterate over our configuration settings and actually pull them all into this response message and just output the value of that response message at that time. So the way to do that would be configuration enumerate as enumerable, and then we'll just say all. And let's see. I will just do this method requires that you return a value, basically a boolean true that everything is working. And let's see, here what we're going to do is we're going to say response message append line, and we're going to say, let's see, key config key, do a pipe value. So basically it's gonna build up that string builder, and the output of that string builder is gonna actually be dumped to our window in the screen. So let's go ahead and run that. And what you'll actually be able to see is not only our secret, but also other app settings that exist within this local environment. So let's go ahead and navigate. I already have the tab open, so let me just refresh. And as you can see, it's actually returning many other values. So what you'll also notice is it's returning our app setting 1 with a value of 1. There is the message that was actually being shown before. We also are seeing our config keys, connection string, client ID and secrets. So you typically don't want to do this kind of thing because you're exposing all your app configurations. And you can see that this app setting secret is actually shown right here, and the value of that is clouddeveloper.io. So this is actually running locally on our machine. So let's see how this works when we try to deploy it to Azure. So let's go ahead and stop this. And let's go ahead and right click and then publish. And go ahead and hit publish right here. It's going to take a few moments and actually publish that new to our Azure account. Okay, So as you can see, it actually published. Now let's go to our Azure portal, and here's our function. Let's go to the function section, and the get message is already here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go code plus test and grab the URL that we can use for testing of this function itself. So let's go ahead and click that button and click copy and open up a new tab and press enter. Now what you'll notice is that this function host is not running. Now there's a reason for that, and that is if you go back to our function, the problem here is that it's actually saying it's forbidden. As you can see, it's saying the user, group, or application, and it gives you the app ID, does not have the secret get permission on Key Vault itself. So, and that's because we actually need to now grant this particular function app the ability to talk to Key Vault just like we did for the SPN. So what I'll do is I'll just grab the name. If you remember, I actually had the identity already configured here, so it's turned on. And then all I have to do is just go to our Key Vault right here and add another access policy. And we want to do that on the secret. So I'll give it get in the list. And let's go ahead and search for that. Select that identity, hit select, click add, click save. And once that's done, we'll be able to actually go ahead and stop it. And let's go ahead and start it. Give it a little bit. And let's give it a try. So, and there you go. Basically, what you'll observe right here is a lot of the app settings that were available to us locally when we were doing local development were showing up because they were in a local settings JSON file. Now in here, because we're not deploying that file, we're actually running under a managed identity, all of the information needed in order to connect to Key Vault as well as app configuration is actually done through a managed identity. This is the main benefit of using managed identities, is because they allow you to use the object itself and the identity tied to it, so that when that object gets cleaned up, like an Azure function, all of the associated access is actually automatically revoked. But you still have the ability to access all of these things when that function exists with that identity, and it gives you a very secure way of accessing your secret configurations and other services in Azure. So hopefully this video was useful for you. If you have any questions, feel free to leave your comments in the comment section below, and I'll try to get to them as quickly as I can. Otherwise, have a wonderful day.